Hello, Josh. It's so great to see you again. How have you been?
I'm good, Izabella. Great to be on your show. So excited to be on here again and to talk all things thyroid, natural healing, and everything else. So thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, it's such a pleasure to have you here. I love everything that you've done for all of us in the community. Anytime I look for information about a condition that I'm trying to learn more about, I love going to your website. And, you've just been such a pillar of great information for healing. And you've helped so many people over the years. For anybody listening that may not have heard of Dr. Josh Axe, I want to know what got you into natural medicine. Was this always a passion of yours?
Yeah, well, I think this is true for most people, including yourself, and what at least shifted the way that you practice. I had a mom who was very into fitness, but not into health. And at 40 years old, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it was really shocking to us because my mom was my gym teacher in elementary school. She was a swim instructor. You would have looked at her, thought she was healthy, yet she had this cancer diagnosis. And my family lived in what I'll call the conventional medical model. Anytime we were sick, we took antibiotics, we took medications. We didn't know anything about nutrition, anything about natural health. And so my mom went through all the conventional medical treatment. She had a mastectomy. She went through chemotherapy. When my mom went through that, there are a few things I remember. One, I remember at one point my mom, I have this vivid picture of her taking a comb through her hair and all of her hair coming out, like chunks of it coming out. I remember going in the other room and just praying and crying and just saying, God, like, why? It was so hard. I was 13 years old. And I remember two other things at the time. I said, sort of my internal voice was, I said to myself, there's got to, like, I want to help people like my mom. And that's really what first initiated me to be like, I want to be a doctor. And the other thing was, there's got to be a better way to help people heal than seeing them suffer. The treatment requires so much suffering. And my mom eventually overcame her cancer diagnosis via conventional methods, but afterwards she seemed so sick and tired. I mean, you're going to know this from your experience and working with so many patients, but she was diagnosed soon after with chronic fatigue syndrome. She had hypothyroidism. She was just sick and tired all the time. I mean, she was always a cold, always a flu, always exhausted. And that's a big part of my memory of my mom growing up, is she was just so tired all the time. And years later, I was actually studying to become a doctor. I was in chiropractic school. I was working on a nutrition degree and certification as well. And I was months away from opening my own functional medicine practice in Nashville, Tennessee. And I got a call from my mom, and just she's sobbing on the phone, and she says, Josh, I've just been diagnosed with cancer again. What do I do? And I said, I'll be home. I flew from Florida, where I was in school, back to Ohio. We sat down, prayed together, talked about it. We felt really led to take care of her all naturally. And I was really blessed at the time, Izabella, to have some amazing doctors of integrative and functional medicine around me who knew a lot of the holistic treatments, and I listened to them. I did a lot of my own research. I mean, I read, thousands of hours of medical journals and read books about how to help my mom heal. And we decided to have a conversation with our oncologist and say, hey, we want to give it 3 to 4 months of these natural treatments and see what happens. And she said, well, it's not what I recommend, but it's your choice. And so we did that. And some of the big changes we made were, like, my mom's diet pretty much went to doing primarily a lot of vegetables. We did a mixture of steamed vegetables, juice vegetables, and some raw, like salad. We did the primary sort of protein was, we did fish and bone broth, a lot of salmon. We had her do mushrooms. We had her do berries. We had her do things like beets and carrots, but that was it. I mean, that was sort of like the basis of her diet. And then we also did a lot of supplements. We did reishi mushroom and cordyceps. We did high dose turmeric. We did a lot of probiotics. We did just a lot of other herbals like astragalus. And we also really worked on her healing emotionally. She had a lot of fear and worry in her life. My mom rode horses as a kid. It's what she loved to do. So we said, okay, every day we're just going to do what you love to do. So she went and rode horses, and her and my dad loved the water. So they'd go out boating. And my mom loved walking in nature. So she'd go on walks. She loved funny movies. So her and my dad, when they would watch something, it would only be comedies. And she also believed a lot in spiritual healing. So she prayed, she recited Bible verses constantly, and we practiced visualization, her healing from cancer. And we followed this protocol very closely for 4 months. We went back to her oncologist. They redid a CT scan. And I'll never forget this. They called the next day, and they said, before even telling us the diagnosis, her doctor, was a female oncologist, she called and she said, what have you been doing when we shared? And she goes, well, this is highly unusual. We don't typically see this, but your largest tumor shrunk by more than half. And she had a tumor in
Wow.
her lungs. And she said, I don't know what you're doing. I know you told me a little bit, but you can a few more months, and we need to check this again in 9 months. Went back 9 months later, almost complete remission. And today, my mom is in complete remission. She's in her 70s, and she's in the best shape of her life. She's bringing her grandkids to Disney World, has great health, and my mom also, this is amazing, overcame other medical conditions. And with that, my mom also, she was on antidepressant and an anti-anxiety drug. As I mentioned, she really struggled. She had hypothyroidism. She was sick and tired. Her energy, went through. And so today she's on zero medications in her 70s and has great health. And so that's really a big part of what the impetus for me becoming a doctor, but also the reason that I practice the way I practice is I always wanted to go and find a way to first do no harm and to help the body heal as naturally as possible and actually get to the root cause of disease, something I know that you share with your patients and the people you work with. And so that's a big part of what led me to, also starting drx.com and a supplement company and everything else. But it was through that experience.
Wow. Well, first of all, she's so lucky to have you, and we're so lucky to have you too, sharing your experience with the world. I just find that what an incredible thing can happen if the body can heal. It's capable of healing if we take away those things that trigger the disease state in our bodies and we give the body what it needs to thrive. It's just beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and doing this incredible work in this world. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about how do you actually get to the root cause of disease? We talked about, you talked about cancer, we talked about hypothyroidism, we talked about depression. All of these things seem to be unrelated, right? But there are actually root causes to each, right?
There are. What I like to do is something that is as old as Socrates, and that is do something called the 5 whys method. And so keep asking why until we get to what we truly believe and know is the root cause, something that we can control, something we can impact ideally. And I'll give you an example of this with diabetes is an easy one, but because because you're the thyroid world's leading expert, let's talk about thyroid health. And so when I think about hypothyroid, and this one's more challenging than diabetes, let me do diabetes first, then we'll get into thyroid because thyroid is more complex in doing this. So what I like to do with the 5 whys is first say, well, why do I have diabetes? Well, okay, first why is, well, it has to do with you've got your A1C levels are very high, okay, which is related to blood sugar being high. Well, why has that happened? Well, okay, the next layer down might be somebody could discover that, oh, it's because my insulin receptor sites aren't working well with insulin. They're quote unquote burned out. And that's the really issue around type 2 diabetes. Okay, well, why are those insulin receptors burnt out? Well, it has to do with excess carbohydrates and sugar in the bloodstream. It's too much for it to handle. It burns it out. Okay, there's too much sugar in the bloodstream. Okay, well, how do we get less sugar in the bloodstream? We eat less sugar. Okay, well, why is somebody eating so much sugar? Well, they just don't know, maybe even where sugar is hidden. They don't know that there's sugar in pasta sauce and salad dressings and in lunch meat and in cereal. And they may not realize that bread and and potato chips and all these things break down into sugar, and so they don't even realize that they're over consuming carbohydrates, and that's a big reason behind this. And so now we know, okay, well, what do we need to do? The root cause is educate people, help people follow a diet that's high in protein, fat, fiber, and nutrients. Okay, and what does that look like? So we keep going layers deeper to find the root cause. Now, there might be other root causes with type 2 diabetes. Of course, there's nutrient deficiencies, there's toxic load, those sort of things. So doing a very similar thing with hypothyroid, what you'll tend to do is, okay, well, and of course, it's going to be different for Hashimoto's, hypothyroid, and Graves' disease, but you're going to do that. Okay, well, what's going on here? Okay, well, we're looking at TSH and T3 and T4, and these markers are off. So or we're looking at thyroid antibodies. Okay, well, that's where our diagnosis is coming. But then let's start going layers deeper of, like with hypothyroidism, for instance, one of the things you might notice is that part of a diagnosis could be, well, my body temperature is low. Okay, So, well, why is the body temperature low? And then you start getting into that. And so I think you just continue to go with these 5 whys downstream further and further and further. And one of the forms, so what happens is you're going to have a few, like at the top, you're going to have things break off and you're going to say there's going to be multiple causes. One of those might be nutrient deficiencies, right? So in my research, what I've really found with hypothyroid is there's a lot of B vitamin deficiencies. I know when you were on my podcast, we talked about B12. I also think thiamine, I think riboflavin, I think folate, it's a lot of these things that are tied to methylation. So maybe there's another one. There's a genetic component that is exacerbating the issue, making it harder for you to fully convert some of these B vitamins that then support, thyroid hormone production. Of course, there's iron, there's zinc, and I think probiotics. To me, that's a really big one is that, if your gut microbiome isn't healthy, and you know this as well as anyone, oftentimes when we're finally asking the 5 whys and saying, why is my thyroid off? Why do I have antibodies, or why am I not converting T3 to T4? Why is this not happening? Oftentimes we find our way down to the gut and the adrenal glands, right? So we oftentimes end up with those two organ systems. And so now we need to say, okay, now why are those not functioning properly? So why is my body pumping out so much cortisol and adrenaline? Or why do I have leaky gut syndrome? What are the root causes there? And ultimately, we're going to get to diet with a lot of these. Now, it tends to be diet, lifestyle, and then of course emotional stress, spiritual stress, those sort of things, those tend to be lumped in there. And so then you can start to say, okay, what are the foods that are going to cause this me to produce antibodies, and what are the foods that are least likely to do that? Okay, you mentioned on my show, to repeat this again, we know gluten, we know A1 casein is a primary protein found in cow's milk dairy. Those are those two proteins we're going to find that are the biggest offenders. And then there's other things, of course. I think foods that are very difficult to digest. Raw vegetables, like raw cruciferous vegetables. Raw nuts and seeds, I think, can be hard sometimes for a lot of people too with gut issues. And then we look at those things. And so we could keep going here, but just to say, what I like to do is sort of continue to go down those 5 whys. And sometimes it's 7 whys, sometimes it's 3, but generally going down to find, okay, what is really the root of the issue? And with someone like yourself, again, you end up really discovering so much of it is diet related, it's lifestyle related. And then when we can address those, it's like it's not that you don't have enough metformin or insulin, necessarily just, it's not a metformin deficiency. It's not a synthroid deficiency. There's a deficiency or a toxicity somewhere in the body. And let me give you, this is sort of the way that I think about cellular health and organ health. I think that we tend to have a lack of cellular energy, a lack of cellular nutrients, and a lack of too many toxins. So disease is caused by toxicity, deficiency, and really not enough energy.
I love that. It's amazing that you bring up this way of thinking. My training is, I'm a pharmacist, so I was trained in diseases, right? And it was like, okay, if you have this disease, then this is the medication you take. And when we think about it, the medication is so far away from the root cause. Yes, and sometimes we do need medication when the person's condition is like really severely advanced enough, right? The medication might be the thing that saves their life, or this might be the thing that they really, really need. But the lifestyle changes are oftentimes, for many conditions, they're going to be the things that can turn the condition around. I know when I was in pharmacy school, we did a little bit. We talked just a tiny bit about lifestyle changes, and diabetes, like you said, was one of those conditions where we actually had a pretty significant section talking about the lifestyle changes in diabetes. And, just being a pharmacy student, it was very eye-opening to me, because I was like, we have all of these medications for diabetes, but lifestyle is actually the key. And I'm talking about type 2 diabetes, right? And so it was just very shocking to me that I was like, this is a lifestyle induced health condition. Why are we not talking to people about lifestyle? Why, like, when they're 10 years old, 20 years old, 30 years old, 40 years old, why am I seeing all these people coming to my pharmacy when they're 50, 60, 70 years old? and they have to be on all these medications, and some of them have, have had to have amputations, and they're dealing with all of these health consequences. And so, for me, funny enough, I started working in public health, and that's when I got my root cause analysis training, was in my public health job. But we weren't looking at the root causes of disease. We were looking at the root causes of why healthcare systems were dysfunctional. And it was interesting because I was like, okay, we can apply this to healthcare systems like hospitals and clinics and so on and so forth, but why can't we apply this to the human body? And that's how, just kind of looking through that lens, I was turned on to functional medicine, and I got into, trying to figure out. I kind of finally got a name to what I was doing, because I was trying to find the cause of my Hashimoto's when I was working in public health, and I was like, whoa, could there be a root cause to this? So thank you so much for sharing that process. I think a lot of people are very quick to say, okay, if you have this disease, this is the drug, or maybe this is the supplement. But if you keep asking those questions, like, what caused this, right? What caused this? A lot of times we can get to that lifestyle component. Now,
Yeah, and as I know you've mentioned too, I mean, oftentimes there's multiple causes. I do want to mention one because you talked about medications here. There was a study in the British Medical Journal, and it was done on over 5,000 women, and it was on birth control. And they found that if a woman has been taking birth control for up to 10 years, their chance of getting hypothyroidism goes up by 283.7%. So we're talking about dramatically. And so one of the things, and this surprised a lot of women. I mean, if you're a woman listening to this and you have taken birth control, and then after that, a year later, 5 years later, 10 years later, you were diagnosed with hypothyroidism, there's a good cause that was the main drivers. People don't realize there is not a single drug or medication that doesn't pull nutrients out of your body or doesn't cause your body to use excess nutrients. Birth control pills specifically, according to this study, deplete your body of vitamin B1, B2, B6, B9, B12, zinc, iron, vitamin C, and
which these are all the
probiotics.
things we need
And
for
many of
thyroid
those,
function.
exactly. Those are all the things you need for thyroid function. And so, this drives me crazy too when physicians go and recommend. I mean, there's another study. The CDC just came out and said that doctors are prescribing at least 50% too many antibiotics each year. And you know how many doctors prescribe antibiotics? And that does a very similar thing to birth control, even a little stronger. Now it's a shorter time. But it's depleting your body of a lot of these B vitamins and nutrients that are critical. But they almost never then recommend a follow-up high dose regimen of probiotics, which always blows my mind that they wouldn't at the very least do that, to at least try and replenish some of what's been taken. But all that being said, I think that is one important thing for people to be aware of. If you're on a medication, you can go and find this information, go and look up antidepressant nutrient depletion. You can look on an AI tool like ChatGTP as well, or just do a Google search and find what nutrients are depleted from this medication. And then you want to go and take those, like metformin, statin drugs. We know those deplete the body of coenzyme Q10. But again, I really think so many people today have these B vitamin deficiencies, along with iron and zinc in particular, that are depleted through taking things like birth control and antibiotics.
My gosh, that's such a great point. We were chatting a little bit earlier, but is birth control sabotaging your thyroid health? Was the very first blog post I wrote on my website, Thyroid Pharmacist, in 2013. And now there's even more science and research behind this. So, we know that proton pump inhibitors and birth control and antibiotics can really impact our thyroid health. They can also lead to conditions like irritable bowel syndrome, and they could lead to food sensitivities. They can cause us to have infections such as H. pylori become more active in our bodies. I wanted to ask a little bit more and shift into cellular health and cellular medicine. So what exactly does that mean? And can you tell us a little bit more about this unique approach to healing?
Well, I really think cellular medicine is going to be the future of medicine in terms of what we're looking at. When you look at the things that would fall under cellular medicine, tend to also, I would say, many of them be connected to functional medicine and regenerative medicine. Thinking about stem cells, thinking about natural killer cells, thinking about exosomes, thinking about the mitochondria and ribosomes and epigenetics. And so I think a lot of these things fall under the umbrella of cellular medicine. You know, our body is made up of around 35 trillion cells. And if you want to get well, you got to heal the cell. It's really, really important, and make sure that that's functioning properly. And so one area of that could be tied to something like methylation. You know, I think that's really a big part of our cellular health. And here's another thing just to consider. On average, our organs and glands are new about every year. The liver, for instance, is new every 150 days to 500 days. Okay, so it's about every year these organs, the tissues are completely new. The problem is that our thyroid, our ovaries, our pancreas, our organs are not creating new healthy tissue. They're just continually being damaged, or the tissue itself is not, it's not creating healthy tissue. And so what you really need to do is focus on how do you promote cellular regeneration so you have a new thyroid next year. And the way that you do that, one is by bolstering your cellular energy. Now, the organ that's the most tied to this is going to be the adrenal glands. And this is something in Chinese medicine I'll never forget. I went to a doctor who was a Chinese medicine doctor and acupuncturist. And I was working so hard in practice. I was worn out. And he came and he said to me, he's a man from Taiwan. And he said, you know, your body battery should be at 5. He goes, it's at 2. And I said, okay. And he said, that's your problem. And what I was having I was having actually leaky gut. It was my second year of practice. And I'm like, I'm eating perfect. I am literally eating perfectly. What's going on? And I made changes. Boom. All of a sudden, 3 months later, gut was, you know, as good as it had ever been. But one of the things I realized is that, you know, just like imagine you've got your phone in front of you and you've got a battery there of about 40%. Well, your body prioritizes things. And so your body's going to first prioritize survival, and it'll do things to help you survive. So if you're in a fight or flight state, your body will start storing fat. It'll cause certain hormones to go up. Like probably cortisol is going to be high more often. Melatonin might be low more often. I mean, these things start to shift and happen in the body. I mean, this happens a lot with fertility as well. If you have a 40% battery, your body is going to say, I don't have the energy and resources to create a new human being. I mean, so this is what happens. So you really need to focus on boosting up your cellular energy is really important. And this is really tied to the something called your mitochondria. The mitochondria is the engine of your cells. It's what supports your body in producing something called ATP, which is cellular energy. Now, if you go back and study Chinese medicine, there's a word called qi. It's QI. And that is the word in ancient Asian medicine that's been used for thousands of years. It's really tied to the cellular energy concept, which then is tied to this idea around ATP. In the organ system, again, it's most closely related to is going to be the adrenal glands. And so if you are low in cellular energy, your body just doesn't have enough energy. And the practice that is the most tied to cellular energy, you're gonna be like, well, duh, but it's sleep. If you're not getting good quality sleep, your body can't regenerate and heal. That's why, I mean, sleep is one of the biggest things you can do to heal your thyroid, reverse autoimmune disease, heal your body, but heal at a cellular level. So you have to sleep to build up that battery. And not just sleep, you want to get good quality sleep. You know, you want to get a combination of REM and deep sleep as well, and wake up feeling rested. And I think a lot of times this doesn't happen because your body has been producing so much cortisol, so many stress hormones, that even when you sleep at night, part of the night, you're not fully rested because you've been living in this emergency state. So to boost up your cellular energy, one is you want to get sleep. The other component is you need to have the right, it's not just stress. Sometimes people say, well, I need to just get rid of stress. Stress isn't all bad. In fact, sometimes when you go through a stressful relationship or a stressful time in life, you can grow in character, you can grow up stronger. Imagine your body lifting weights, and after a good workout, now your muscles are more lean and defined. You're a better runner because you pushed yourself on that last workout. That's good if you have the right perception of stress and you just don't have too much of it. So, hey, have a little bit of stress in your life. Just don't live in a stress state 24 hours a day. I want to share with you, Izabella, the most stressed I've ever been was probably, let me say this, it was probably one of the top 2. I remember the last presidential cycle, and not going to get into politics here, but just saying, I really paid attention to the news probably more than I'd ever had. And there's this ticker on CNN and Fox and every CNBC, everything, showing the amount of people that were dying per minute. And I was really kind of focused on what's going on. And I realized I did it for about a month or two. I was watching way more news than I ever had because I wanted to know what was going on politically. And I realized, wow, I am so stressed right now. I'm not sleeping well. I'm tired. I can tell like my skin, certain things, I just don't feel well. And I just stopped watching the news. And that alone, and listen, it's not that I never kept up with the news at all. I just decided every other day, I'm going to check for 5 minutes just to know what's going on in the world. And then I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to scroll down, social media, rabbit holes and do all of this. And it made a big impact. And so the other thing is, this is for me spiritually. I started focusing more on God, reading the Bible, reading spiritual growth books. And when I did that, all of a sudden it was like, well, God is for me, not against me. I've got a God that loves me and cares for me. And when I started realizing that and focusing on my relationship with God, my family, the things that mattered the most in my life, all of a sudden the stress went away. And again, my battery started getting more and more full. So the two most important things you can do for cellular energy is going to be sleep and balancing out stress in your life, typically by doing the things you love to do. And then there are a few other components. There are certain nutrients that are really required for cellular energy. B12 is a big one. There are certain herbals. The family of adaptogens are the biggest used in Chinese medicine, but also today, you look at an herb like ashwagandha. When you look at, again, a big part of my background is Asian medicine and a little bit of Ayurveda. And in Chinese medicine, they call hypothyroidism a qi and yang deficiency. So qi is really tied to adrenal. They say that is actually more than the thyroid, typically, oftentimes is part of the root cause. And then the secondary thing would be yang, which means your body isn't anabolic enough. So it's not regenerating enough. And so the typical, so like ashwagandha is a qi and yang boosting herb. And that's why it's probably, at least in Ayurveda, the most prescribed herb for hypothyroidism. And in Chinese medicine, another part of that would be there's an herb called dong quai. This helps address low ferritin or iron levels and also supports getting those cortisol levels under control at the same time. And there's other herbs. They also recommend ashwagandha. There's astragalus, rhodiola rosea, cordyceps mushrooms, reishi. Those are typically prescribed in ancient Asian medicine for helping bolster up and recharge the battery. It's interesting. It's a little different for Graves' disease. I do want to mention it's not a qi and yang deficiency like in hypothyroid and Hashimoto's. It's a qi and yin deficiency. And so with that, an adaptogenic herb that's typically prescribed is Rehmannia or lemon balm or things that are more calming to the body instead is really what the focus is on more there for that in particular. So the first component for healing the cell is going to be, we got to boost up the cellular energy, sleep, stress, those things. The second thing is reducing toxicity. And this is everything from environmental toxins like glyphosate, forever chemicals like you'd find in Teflon pans, all the chemicals in our food supply, but medications that I mentioned earlier, medications prescribed correctly even by your doctor, these will pull nutrients from your body. They're toxic to many of our organ systems. So now your body has to deal with that. Acetaminophen, like aspirin, that's toxic to the stomach lining in the kidneys and the liver. So these are toxins that start to build up on our body. And I also believe a part of a component of this has to do with emotional toxicity, having really negative thoughts, anger, resentment, envy towards others, that starts to build up and affect your body as well. And then just food that maybe isn't toxic to other people, but that's toxic to you. Some of those food sensitivities, A1 casein found in dairy, gluten in much higher doses that's not broken down via a fermentation process that now you can't digest properly. These all act on toxins to our body. So big thing there is you need to remove those toxins from the body. And sometimes you might need some gentle support from herbs like milk thistle and others. But that's what you want to do there. And the last step for cellular healing is addressing the nutritional deficiencies. And this is very, very common. I think that one of the issues with hypothyroid and Hashimoto's, and Izabella, you know this as well as anybody, is there's not like one primary deficiency. There's a lot of them. I mean, if somebody's deficient in any of the B vitamins, especially B12, that can affect the thyroid. B2 and folate are primary responsible for methylation. That can affect the thyroid. Iodine, zinc, selenium, iron. I mean, there are numerous deficiencies. There are amino acids like tyrosine. I also think glycine and glutamine are important more for the gut, but then how those affect the thyroid. So there are a lot of these deficiencies. And so, one, you want to make sure your diet is as nutrient dense as possible, but also as easy on the immune system and gut as possible. This is why I like bone broth and a lot of organic meat. Those are very easy to digest generally for the body, especially in a soup. In fact, that's what they'd recommend in Asian medicine is typically a lot of soups. As a grain, they don't recommend many grains, but the one grain they do typically recommend for thyroid issues is rice that's cooked in a slow cooker for like 24 hours, so it's just mush. So it's almost broken down into nothing, like a basmati or a jasmine, and then some healthy fats. They typically recommend seafood, especially a lot of wild salmon, those sort of things as well. And that's a basis of a diet. Very easy to digest, some good fats, maybe a little bit of rice. It's cooked for a long time. And that's sort of the basis of the diet there. But nutrients, I recommend a really good B vitamin, B complex. Would also recommend maybe a multi or something that has, again, things like selenium, and then some herbs that maybe help with some of those deficiencies as well. We mentioned ashwagandha, dong quai, probably being two of the top there for most women. I could keep going, but just to say, I think it's really all of those components we want to look at when it comes to healing the cells of the thyroid and, of course, the adrenals too that we mentioned.
Oh my gosh, I love that. It's amazing to see there's so many different healing modalities out there, but they all sort of meet in the middle. I wrote a book about the adrenals a few years ago, and a lot of people were saying, well, adrenal fatigue doesn't exist. It's actually a mitochondrial dysfunction. And I'm like, yes, but do you realize that all of the things that you take to support your adrenals, they also support your mitochondria, they support your cellular energy. And so, and even traditional Chinese medicine might call the condition something else, right? We might call it adrenal fatigue, or a conventional medical doctor or a psychologist might call it burnout. Somebody might say it's mold toxicity, or that's just extreme stress or sleep deprivation. But all of these things happen when the body feels drained, when the body doesn't feel safe, whether that's coming from an infection or a lifestyle, or that everybody in 2020, I think we all went through this extreme fear, this extreme traumatic situation. And part of it was driven by watching the news. So big part of what I recommend is actually like a news diet, right? You're cleaning up your regular diet, you're eating clean foods, and you're filling your plate with highly nutrient dense food. Why not fill your life and I guess your ears with uplifting content, whether that is podcasts that you enjoy, or scripture, or songs, or funny movies, right? So these things can really transform our lives. We talked a little bit about your mom's healing journey, and I know I always come from my own healing journey. I always share whatever I've been through, and I try to, I guess, create a resource in the world for others so that they, I guess, have a shorter learning curve, and that they can really accelerate their healing. And it's always kind of surprising to me, I guess, you try to live the most healthy lifestyle and your best, but still things can happen, right? I know that you recently, you almost died a year ago. Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, it was kind of crazy, Isabella. This was actually this all started a few years ago. I injured my back lifting weights. I was doing something else. I was just trying to do too many heavy weights too fast, and I ended up bulging and herniating two discs in my back: L5, S1, L4, L5. And I did a lot of things to help myself heal. I did physical therapy, I did chiropractic care, I did cold laser, I did exercise, I did everything. And I got probably 50, 60% better, but I didn't get all the way better. I still had chronic back pain every day. And so then I got turned on to a therapy called stem cell therapy. And I went and got my bone marrow draw. I got it injected. And after that, I felt probably 90% better. I mean, I was amazed at how effective it was. And that helped for years. And then I went back because I had a little bit, even though it was close to 100%, it was more like 90%. And I still had this nagging issue in one spot left. And I thought, if I go get stem cell one more time, I will probably heal 100%. Well, I went and got it done, and something didn't feel right afterwards. And for the next few weeks, I felt worse and worse and worse. And finally, I had to wear a back brace. It was so bad. I thought, gosh, I must have really re-injured it somehow. And I didn't know what I did, though. And finally, one day, it was so bad I could barely walk one day. And then the next morning, I woke up and I couldn't walk. I mean, the pain was so excruciating. We had to call an ambulance. My family and I were living between Nashville and Puerto Rico. So we were in Puerto Rico. And I had to have an ambulance come pick me up, bring me to a hospital, and they took an MRI. I got the report back, and it said, I have a spinal infection and osteomyelitis. And so then it wasn't, here's the problem. It wasn't just, it was in my disc, it was in my L5 vertebra, and it had gotten out into the spinal canal. There was an abscess by my spinal cord with the infection as well. So I had to take a private flight from, like they had to have an ambulance pick me up, put me in a plane, like fly me to Florida. I went and met with an infectious disease specialist there, and he sat down with me. He said, Josh, this is really, really, serious. He said, I want to give you your prognosis. He said, your best case scenario is you're going to have chronic pain the rest of your life, and you'll be the first person to know when bad weather is coming through. He said, that's best case. He said, worst case is this is so spread in your vertebra, it could kill you. And there's a really good likelihood you're going to be permanently disabled. Now, Izabella, I had heard that, and this was about a year and a half ago. And I was just really struck. I mean, it was crazy to me was I didn't have to get this injection done. I mean, I had a little back pain, but it wasn't that bad at all. I was throwing my 2-year-old daughter, 8 feet in the air in the pool. I was cycling, I was swimming, I was running, I was deadlifting and squatting. I mean, I was in really good shape. And then to be told by a doctor that I, in all likelihood, would be permanently disabled, maybe have to have rods put in my spine. I mean, so I had about 48 hours there where I was just, let me just say this, there were emotions I had never experienced before. Like I had never really experienced what it felt like to be truly hopeless. Like there was just no hope at all. I had never experienced despair, like feeling like, okay, no matter what I do, I can't fix this now. I can't go back in time. And so I just felt really depressed and just horrible for a couple of days. And then I decided I got to lean into God and pray. And I just prayed. And I just really felt like I realized something that wasn't serving me, and that I have a God that's bigger than my diagnosis. And so I decided that I was just going to focus on getting back to 100%. And the doctor, I met with him again the next day, and he said 2 days later, and he said, okay, I'm going to recommend he said, I'm going to recommend likely that you're going to need to be on antibiotics for 3 months. 6 weeks of IV and 6 weeks of oral. He said, because the disc in bone has almost no blood supply, and it just takes an incredibly long time to get that there. And so then I thought, well, gosh, not only am my back going to be, could be a wreck, but my gut and my cells. And so I said, I'm going to do my own research and also figure out, and by the way, I'm not stupid. I'm going to do some medication. Now, I had not taken a medication outside of maybe a half a pill one time because I had a procedure years ago, but I really had not taken a medication since I was 19 years old when I got my wisdom teeth removed. And I only took it for like 2 days then, because I just never like to take medication. And so I was 40. And so I hadn't taken medication like almost 20 years. And so then to be told, hey, you're gonna have to be on these antibiotics. And of course I've studied gut health my whole life, and to be told you got to be on this for 3 months. So I started doing research, and I said, okay, well, I'm going to do antibiotics because I have to heal. I've got to do everything I can. And if my gut is injured, I'm going to do my best to rehab it. Exactly. But I said, I want to see if I can cut down on time. Is there any research? I came across this amazing study on hyperbaric chambers. And they had a group of people, it was on like 20 people, I believe, that all had osteomyelitis, that infection in the bone. And they were able to take their antibiotic time down to 1 month from 3 months. And so now they were in a hard chamber for like 2 hours a day. And I said, I'm going to find this. I went and I did that. I also went and did IV. So I got on this IV antibiotic. At the same time, I went and I got in a hyperbaric chamber for 2 hours every day, a hard chamber, which is a lot stronger than a soft chamber. I then also did IVs. I did an IV daily of silver, of ozone, of a Myers cocktail with glutathione and B vitamins. I also did, when I wasn't doing the IV, I did the IV in the morning. At night, I did very high dose probiotics. This might shock people. I was doing 1 trillion probiotics a day, then and after. And then also I was doing a lot of B vitamins and other nutrients like liver. And so I followed this protocol for the first 2 weeks, I didn't feel better the first 10 days. Finally, around day 10, I was like, I feel 1% better. And then another 1% the next week and another 1%. Uh, I didn't walk in total by myself for a year. I didn't walk at all for 10 months. And then I was on a walker for 2 months. So this time last year, I was still on a walker that we're doing this interview. And I'm glad to say this, and I'll come back to it, just a few other details, but I am now probably at, I'll say 85%. I'm better than the best he told me I would be. I don't have chronic pain every day. I'm back lifting weights. I can carry my daughter. And I think I'll be 100% by the end of this year. I just keep getting better and better. So all that being said, I think it's just so important for people to understand. Like you might be listening to this and you have a diagnosis, and maybe you were told you have to be on this pill the rest of your life, or your condition is irreversible, or you might think I can only heal maybe by 25% or 50%. The reality is your body has an amazing capacity to heal. If you get your body in the right healing environment, it can heal from almost anything. Now, I am aware, like sometimes there are just issues that are very, very hard to correct that could be genetic or structural issues. But again, there are stories of so many people that have reversed hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, autoimmune disease, my mom with cancer, myself with a spinal infection, being told that I might be permanently disabled. And so I learned so much from that. I really think, and God always does this, he takes our pain, and if we allow him, he'll use it for a purpose. I know more now about cellular medicine, regenerative medicine, natural healing than I ever have. I mean, I in longevity. And so I've really studied this stuff a lot. And by the way, my gut, I had almost no symptoms. The only symptom I had was constipation because I wasn't moving. But even afterwards, I never once had loose stool. And I think it was because of this protocol that I followed, which again was very high dose probiotic and high dose B vitamins along with that. Well, and let me say high dose B vitamins. I did B vitamins, but I also did a lot of organ meats, which was like a B supplement as well. And then the hyperbaric chamber, I think, was tremendous for healing as well. And so, but that was a big thing for me. I think in terms of like my healing process was doing those things.
Thank you for sharing that incredible story. I know sometimes we're faced with things that are incurable, right? Or we think they're incurable, or that's what conventional medicine says. And I don't think, you were necessarily an infectious disease spinal expert. So you could have given away your power at that time and been like, okay, this is my destiny. I'm giving up and I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to just do this. But you chose to take charge of your own health and to trust in yourself and trust in God and trust in your body's ability to heal. And here you are today.
Yeah. There were so many lessons that came out of that. One other thing I want to mention is I think our mindset is so important for healing. I mean, the biggest battle I had was my mindset. I mean, the hopelessness, despair, you'll never heal. I mean, I had this limiting belief that crept in that, well, you can heal, but not 100%. You could probably only get back to maybe 70%, and you'll never get back to lifting, heavy weights or, throwing your daughter in the pool. You'll be able to walk, but not be able to and then I just had to take that thought captive and say, you know what, that's not true. And I had to also be very aware, and you're aware of this research. The placebo effect is amazing. So is the nocebo effect. I mean, the placebo effect, going back to World War I, there were soldiers who had these incredible injuries of losing limbs and just serious pain. And the drug they were given is morphine. And one of the practicing physicians at the time, they ran out of morphine, and he felt like he had to give the patients something, these fallen soldiers. So he literally gave them sugar pills. He gave them nothing. Here's the craziest part about this placebo. 30 to 40% of them had the same amount of pain relief as if they were taking morphine. Think about that. Your brain can create chemicals that are as powerful as morphine for numbing your body, and more powerful than any drug at actually regenerating and healing your body. I read this great article by a PhD on how to amplify placebo. And he said, here's what you need to do if you want to heal via your mindset. Number one, you need to be very certain about what is it that you want. Like for myself, I wanted to throw my 2-year-old daughter in the air again. That's what I wanted to do. And so I pictured myself doing that. I pictured myself out cycling and swimming and doing those things I love to do, date night with Chelsea and running around chasing my daughter. Like those are the things I pictured. So I was very, very clear. And then he said, the next thing you need to do is experience emotionally that certainty, right? That you have in the future. Experience those emotions as if you're in that state right now. You're doing that right now. So I would picture myself throwing my daughter up in the air, laughing, her hugging me, the joy, the excitement, just those emotions, like that's happening right now. And he said, do that daily for 5 minutes. And then he said, and then you need to create a very specific plan and protocol for how that will become your reality. Because he says, sometimes your nervous system and spirit and mind don't believe you. It's like toxic positivity. You can say, I'm great, I'm wonderful, but you don't really believe it. He said, if you lay out a plan of saying, this is how this will happen, or you see someone else's plan, or you work with a doctor, and they'll say, this is how you'll do it, the chance of you experiencing that miracle, it goes up, in actually placebo, your body creating these new neural pathways and your body sending stem cells to the area, your body actually healing goes up dramatically. It'll do that. So just to know, if you don't believe you'll heal, your body will actually send less healing things like stem cells to the area, versus if you do believe you're going to heal and stay more positive in your mindset, you actually have a better chance scientifically of healing. There's this case study. Again, this is one single case study, but there are multiple of these, of something called the nocebo effect. There was a man who was diagnosed with liver cancer, and he was told he had 3 months to live, and he died about 3.5 months later. Well, they did the autopsy, and he didn't have liver cancer. He had a small benign tumor on his liver, could have lived another 30 years. And one of the things that came out of that, and this has happened many times, there's case studies on this, whereas if you believe you're going to die, you can likely die. And there are, again, medical research on this. And so just to know, the power of your mindset is so important. I mean, again, if you want to heal Hashimoto's, think about what it's going to feel like. Like, what is that state you want to feel? You wake up in the morning and you're energized. Your hair is thick and full. You don't have dark circles under your eyes. You can go out and run. I mean, your mood is high. Your energy is high. You feel great. Be certain about it. Experience those emotions. Again, you're hiking Mount Kilimanjaro, whatever it is you want to do. Experience that emotion, and then create a very specific plan. Your food plan, your supplement plan, your lifestyle plan. Implement those habits in order to make that a reality, and you have a greater chance of healing via the power of the mind.
I love that. It's really does start with mindset. You're just such an inspiration, and thank you so much for sharing your story and everything that you've gone through. I know this will help so many other people. And everybody listening, I know how hard it can seem, especially if you're coming from more of like a conventional medical advice. I was told the same thing with Hashimoto's. You're probably not going to be able to get this condition into remission. And I was working in pharmaceutical sales at the time, and so I would look in the mirror every day and I would say, I'm Izabella Wentz and I'm in charge of my own destiny. And I would say every day, in every way, I'm getting better and better. And I would just keep saying it until I believed it. And I started taking action. And just like you, Josh, and it's like everything, sometimes I think as experts, we have our expertise in a certain framework where diabetes is easy to reverse. We know all about that, right? Or we know how to do Hashimoto's. I know recently my husband had ulcerative colitis many years ago, and we were able to get that into remission. You came back from an incurable infection, right? So it's just all of the same principles apply for healing. It starts with mindset and creating an action plan. The steps might be a little bit different though, right? So
Yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely agree. Again, everybody, I'm a big proponent of personalized nutrition. Everybody needs something customized for them. And I learned this in practice. I mean, the diet I would give for a cancer patient was not the same as an inflammatory bowel disease person. I mean, someone with cancer, oftentimes I would do some raw foods. with inflammatory bowel disease, I never recommended raw foods ever. So again, yeah, you really need a plan that's customized for you if you're going to be as healthy as possible. And sometimes you can learn that via yourself, but sometimes you need a practitioner, to help you do that.
I love that. I know we talked about personalizing things, but are there things that everybody should be taking, like top supplements, in your opinion?
Yeah, yeah. Let me just hit on statistically the biggest deficiencies that I see and the ones that I believe that help almost everybody, and then we'll narrow it down to thyroid specifically. There was a great, there's this study. I think it was at the University of Oregon State, and they looked at dietary intake along with, I think, actual blood work deficiencies. The biggest deficiency by far is vitamin D. I mean, we know that, we probably hear about that, but it's by far the biggest deficiency you have by far almost everybody. I want to say that now what they did, they didn't do it didn't go on the recommended daily intake or the recommended blood work in terms of them saying, well, you should be above 20 and that's normal, or sometimes 30. It was, no, this is really what should be. Generally, it was like 92 to 94% of the population does not have ideal vitamin D levels. I mean, they're suboptimal for actually your health. And so it's very high. The second nutrient, this might surprise some people, is actually choline. Now, what's interesting is choline used to be known as vitamin B4. It was the B vitamin. And then they stripped it of its B vitamin recommendation, partly because it was only found in animal products. They almost did that with B12 as well. But all that being said, choline was known as vitamin B4, and it is really more in that family, generally speaking. And that's really critically important for methylation or methionine. Anyways, it's important for methylation and for the conversion of certain nutrients into other nutrients, which is important for thyroid health. You only find choline in organ meats and egg yolks for the most part. That's where you're going to find choline is in those animal products. And then from there, there's other key nutrients as well. I would say B12 is really critical for most people. I would say that zinc is another one that so many people are deficient in, along with magnesium. And then people's sodium potassium ratio tends to be pretty far off as well. Potassium deficiency, you don't want to supplement with potassium though. You really want to get potassium ideal. Now you can if you're doing a electrolyte powder that is balanced, and you typically you want one that's a little higher in, like, more of a 1-to-2 ratio or 1-to-4 of probably sodium to potassium. But you want to get potassium from foods like vegetables and fruits. Watermelon is incredibly high, for instance, in potassium itself. Would be a really good one to do. And then just getting into some of the supplements. So the top supplements, I think, for most people, and for thyroid in particular, I would say vitamin D is number one. And again, you're probably have a little bit different. These are just the ones I've seen move the needle. Vitamin D is probably number one. I'm just going to throw B vitamins together, a B complex, as probably number two after that. And then from there, it's really close. If it's woman, I'm going to say iron. If it's man, no. But for women, I would say sort of building something with your blood. The herb I love to do that. I love doing a combination of Dong Quai as an herb, along with maybe liver or some sort of easily digestible iron or something to sort of support that within the body. And then selenium and zinc are probably the next ones on my list in terms of what I think people are most deficient in. And let me move another nutrient up there. I would actually put probiotics maybe as number one, tied with vitamin D. When you take probiotics, you better absorb every one of those nutrients, including those nutrients from your food. Two studies in particular, both large-scale studies. One showed if you're taking a simple probiotic supplement, your absorption of B vitamins goes up by 30%. A study out of Stanford said by 50%. If you're doing a really high dose strong probiotic, it could be by 70% or more. You're getting more than double of the nutrients from the food you're eating. So I really think probiotics are the most essential, one of the most essential for gut health, for thyroid health, that people should consider. And typically you want to do a probiotic that maybe has some prebiotics in it. Postbiotics would be a whole nother conversation, are beneficial. But basically buy just a quality brand and typically try and get some higher CFU counts. And if you've ever taken an antibiotic, you really want to do higher doses of probiotics. I really believe 100 billion plus for a time, especially afterwards, because you just really get to be very deficient and depleted. A few strains that are really good. You mentioned this on my podcast, but that Saccharomyces boulardii is really fantastic for getting rid of H. pylori and yeast and candida out of your system. Soil-based organisms like Bacillus subtilis, Bacillus coagulans, Bacillus clausii, those are known again of soil-based. I think those are very good for some of those upper infections as well that can affect thyroid hormones. So I would say supplement-wise, probiotics, vitamin D, B complex, and then consider some herbals. My two favorites probably for women are ashwagandha, dong quai, and then after that, it depends if you have Hashimoto's and it's more immune related. I would say probably astragalus. If it's not, maybe, and you just have really low energy, maybe something like a rhodiola and cordyceps would be most beneficial for those people. And a few other things I like. I really like bone broth and collagen. I just think for gut health, I think those are going to be beneficial to the body as well. But those are going to be the top ones. I think when I think about what I've seen help, autoimmune and thyroid, those two things in particular, those would be my tops there.
I love that. And I love that you mentioned Dong Quai. I feel like hardly anybody in functional medicine talks about this, but this can be excellent for getting those ferritin levels up.
Well, can I tell you, probably the top 5 herbs prescribed in all of Asia, and they've been studying herbs longer than us in the West. Most people never prescribe those top 4 that or 4 of the 5. I would say the top 5 are probably ginseng, astragalus, dong quai, reishi, and ginger. Now, ginger we do. Okay, so that's the one that we typically probably do some more of. But the others, they're just not that frequent.
And they work so well. I know I love reishi for adrenals and people that just need a little bit more energy in the evenings. Just taking a little bit of reishi can be a really big game changer where you're going to sleep better, you're going to have more energy, and you're going to feel a lot more balanced. And I love that you talked about probiotics having therapeutic dosages. I know a lot of times when I was first on my healing journey, I was like, oh, probiotics, let me go to Walmart or let me go to Walgreens and just take whatever is on the shelf. But generally, the dosages there are going to be very low. And so they're not going to be therapeutic dosages. They're going to be more maintenance doses. So if you already have a healthy gut, you can probably just take smaller doses. But if you're trying to make a difference, you need to get those colony forming units. I would say 50 billion is when we start seeing a big difference. You don't want to start that high. You may want to, like, if you're doing like a capsule, break it apart and just take a little bit of it and then work your way up, just to prevent any kind of major shifts in your microbiome, because that can be a little bit unpleasant. But yeah, sometimes doing those 50 billion, 100 billion, 500 billion CFUs is what might be needed to really move the needle, depending on the condition that you're dealing with and how much of that dysbiosis you have. So we're both over 40. When did this happen? Or like, when did this happen, right? So I know I've been getting a lot more into longevity lately, and you have been as well. Can you share some of your favorite practices and any kind of life hacks for, inquiring minds that want to know how to stay young?
Yeah, so I am very, very much focused on living to be 90, 100, beyond, and not just living, having a full life, being active, feeling great. You know what's interesting? I did a post on social media recently on Instagram, and my audience is very health conscious. But I probably had 10%. So again, 90% were very positive with this. They're like, oh, this was amazing information. 10% though said, I don't want to live to be 100, because I talked about what the top foods to live to be over 100. And I think the reason is now here's the question I would have for somebody. Okay, if you were 90 years old, but felt like you were in your 50s and you could still hike and carry your grandkids and go out to eat with friends and still, would you still not want to be around? Because I think people just associate, maybe they had a family member they saw with Alzheimer's, or they saw a family member that had chronic back pain or knee pain, or they just really were so restricted in life. So all that being said, I'm not talking about adding years to your life. I'm talking about adding life to your years, even more so. I mean, we want to do both. So when it comes to longevity, I think a lot of this is going back to this sort of cellular medicine idea. We want to optimize your body producing its own stem cells. And so, and part of that is we want to optimize your body's own stem cell production, and we also want to protect your cells. There are certain foods that have been used to do this for a very long period of time. Again, if we look at Chinese medicine and others, some of those foods are berries, right? So we know blueberries, raspberries, goji berries in particular are known for this, acai. So I would say just really focusing on getting berries along with pomegranate and figs. Pomegranate has this amazing compound called ellagic acid. I believe there's also some of that in raspberries, but pomegranate in particular has this. And it is incredibly beneficial for longevity, this ellagic acid, along with a lot of these other antioxidants, specifically whether it's a polyphenol or anthocyanins, but these help extend our lifespan and protect our cells. And so I would put berries and those dark purple and blue and black fruits very, very high up on the list in terms of longevity foods. Also, longevity foods, a lot of omegas, I'd say wild caught fish would be on there. I would also say doing a lot of fermented foods like coconut yogurt or sheep's milk yogurt or goat's milk kefir. Now, if you don't tolerate dairy well, do the coconut version. Okay. And then that can be a really great way to get those. Again, I love coconut yogurt and kefir. That's probably what I do on a regular basis the most. And then I would say organ meats and bone broth and grass-fed beef, those sort of things, getting those good meat products, but especially organ meats. The great thing is today you can take them in a capsule, you can take them in as a tablet. And so I think those can be great for people. And this, by the way, this would be a whole nother discussion. But in Chinese medicine, there's a principle, and it's called like supports like. And this is true with food, but also the tissues of the animal you're eating. If we would have gone into an ancient apothecary, which is an ancient pharmacy, which you'll appreciate this, what you would have found the most would be herbs, spices, mushrooms, and glandulars/organs. That's what you would have found in these ancient apothecaries or ancient pharmacies. And so historically, if somebody went in with symptoms regarding hypothyroid, they would oftentimes give them thyroid tissue. If it was adrenal issue, they would give them adrenal tissue. If it was blood issues or a lot of issues, that liver was probably the primary thing that was given to those people. Heart, of course, heart tissue. And so now today it's a little tricky because if you just cut it right out of the animal and then you take it, you have thyroid hormones in there like T3 and T4, and you don't know the exact dosage, which takes a lot more of a care of a physician to start off small and dial in the dosage, and then it can sort of change. And so there is, anyways, I don't want to get too off track there, but my point is that was done for a long period of time. However, I do believe you can do organ meats where those are deactivated, and you can still get the peptides that are found in those organs, which peptides are very important for the healing and functioning and even manufacturing some of those hormones as well. So I like, if people are taking another supplement, I like a multi-organ supplement that has liver and thyroid and adrenal and ovary and those sort of organs in there, I think, to support our tissues. But again, going back to this, I think organ meats, bone broth itself are very beneficial for longevity. So the diet is going to be also a lot of healthy fats, coconut and olive in particular, like olive oil, I would say are going to be very high on the list. So eat a diet. Now, what I just shared with you, it's pretty close to a Mediterranean diet, what you're going to find, but that's a big part of it. The healthiest part of the Mediterranean diet, the most nutrient-dense foods in the Mediterranean diet, eat those. Walking from longevity. At first, listen, I was never a person that told my patients, you just have to walk and that counts as exercise. But when you look at longevity studies, that is the form of exercise that moves the needle the most. Now, it's brisk walking to where you're a little out of breath, but you can still have a conversation. But it's also walking on inclines up and down. Ideally, if you can go to a park or somewhere where now, of course, I know you've lived in Colorado before, and I'm in Nashville. I know you've been in Austin. You can find hills there. So ideally, if you can do some incline up and down, get a little out of breath, that adds years to your life, as does doing weight training in 1 day a week, where you're trying to increase what's called your VO2 max, where you get very out of breath. You're pushing yourself a little bit. It's sort of an interval training, HIIT or Tabata, where you're getting out of breath. But you don't need to do that every day. Really, once to twice a week is enough of that sort of more cardio. And if you can combine those sort of forms of exercise, of just walking a lot, maybe weight training 3 days a week, 1 day of more of that intense cardio, it's going to go a long way to extending your lifespan. And the last two things I think our mindset's really important here as well. I think grow spiritually. There is a study done that once somebody retires, if they don't find something new that they're passionate about where they're contributing, they die early because they don't have a purpose. And so it's really there's this another study that found only 25% of people are clear on what their purpose is. So 75% of people, 3 out of every 4, don't really feel in touch and know this is what I'm called to do with my life. I'm not, both globally as a human and also individually, like your unique gifts and skills. If you want to tap into your purpose, one, you need to tap into God. You need to tap into sort of the spiritual realm. I think that's one thing, or at least to maximize it. Now, the other thing that's part of that is, and I believe there's really 3 main factors that will allow you to have extreme purpose. If you really are able to tap into spiritual growth, for myself, I'm a Christian, really the focus is on loving God, knowing more who your Heavenly Father is, loving people, so willing their good, doing everything you can to bless their life, and number 3, making earth a heavenly place, taking the Garden of Eden and making the entire earth like this paradise, regenerative agriculture, those sort of things will really help that, but really making the earth a heavenly place. So we're called to that globally. Now, what are your unique gifts and skills, the things that God has created for you to do? Is it educating? Is it customer service? Is it farming? What is it that you are really great at doing? Do that and do it towards the good, towards making the earth a heavenly place and growing your character. If you can grow in your character and grow in your unique gifts and skills and use those to contribute to the world in a positive way, that's purpose. That helps you find your purpose. I have a book I wrote called Think This, Not That, that dives deeper into this. And it's called Ikigai, which is a Japanese exercise of finding your purpose, which is, what are you passionate about? What are you good at? And the other thing is, what's a problem in the world? Something that breaks your heart, something you can help. And they also believe, hey, what rewards you? What really kind of makes you say, man, I've done something good, and you really can get proud of those things. So those things will also help you tap into your purpose. But I think that's important. And last thing here, I think there's a lot of great natural therapies. I think stem cell therapy, even after I had the one injury with the thing that happened, I went and got it done again at an amazing clinic called ReHealth in Cancun, best in the world. So I got that done. So I think supporting your body's stem cells. By the way, there are foods that support stem cells. Astragalus, green tea, specifically like matcha, is very helpful, but green teas are very good. The berries I mentioned, and a lot of the adaptogenic herbs are very good for that in particular. And then I want to mention cold plunge here. I am not a fan of everyone doing cold plunge. In Chinese medicine, if you have very cold body temperature, getting in a cold tub every day is not what they'd recommend. It's not what I'd recommend. They would tend to recommend instead infrared sauna for somebody that has hypothyroid in the low body temperature. You do what?
That's what I recommend too, is sauna or warm baths.
Yes, that's much better. Get in a bath, Epsom salts, some Tulsa, some good relaxing essential oils. Now, if you want a cold plunge, do it 1 to 2 days a week, but then also combat it with later in the day or right after, like doing a sauna or a hot tub, or a bath. I mean, so but for most people with thyroid issues, I again, a lot of people I think cold plunge is amazing. But I think in particular for thyroid health, you're really going to be better off focusing on infrared sauna, warming that body up. But I like infrared sauna is probably one of my top therapies for longevity out there. Hyperbaric's great. But I think just general, and here's the last thing, community. Your inner circle is so important for your healing and longevity. This is what I have people do, Izabella. I have people write down the 5 to 7 people you spend the most time with. Now I want you to rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 on what's the degree of iron sharpens iron they are for you, where they're making you better, they're helping you grow, they're positive, they're your biggest cheerleader, they challenge you to be better than you are today. They're not trying to sabotage your diet. They're not trying to tell you, they're not, breaking you down. So rank them that way. Those people that are the 2s and 3s and 4s or 5s and below, don't spend time with those people. Go and find people that are the 7s, 8s, 9s, and the 10s that are inspirational, encouraging. Go find those people and spend time with them. And if you can start building a really positive inner circle of people, it will do probably as much for you for your health as anything. There's a study out of Duke University that found that one of the number one things you can do for your health is simply hang out with more disciplined people. If you hang out with people more disciplined than you, you'll become more disciplined. You'll become more healthy. They found in the study. So it's the last tip there for longevity.
Dr. Josh Axe, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us and for sharing all of your wisdom. All of these strategies are absolutely life-changing. So I know that everybody listening is going to get a lot of value from this information. I know I really appreciated our conversation. Where can people get more information about you, your work, and perhaps connect with you?
Yeah. One of the first would be my podcast. It's the Dr. Josh Axe Show. You can find it on Apple, Spotify, also YouTube. So just search Dr. Josh Axe. You'll find it there. And I did a great interview with Dr. Izabella here. So if you want to learn some of and I thought the questions were good. So I think if you want to dive deep into Hashimoto's, hypothyroid, check out the interview. If you want to start with a podcast, that was a great one there. And people can always just search my name on YouTube, Dr. Josh Axe, thyroid, Hashimoto's, or nutrients or methylation, whatever it is, and find some information there. I'm at Dr. Josh Axe on social media. You can go to Amazon and search Dr. Josh Axe, and I've written some books there as well. And those are probably the best places to find me.
Thank you so much for being here with us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.